Welcome to the Find My Catalyst podcast. We all have problems we're looking to solve, and we know that there are solutions out there, but we struggle with this. How do we find the solution? Where does that nudge come from to help us take the next step and start solving tough problems? This podcast is designed to help you find your catalyst and take that next step. I'm Mike Simmons. I am the founder of Catalyst Sale. This is the last episode of the year, and I'm going to run this unedited and share some video with it just to test some new things out. For any of you who are traveling this time of year, you know how much of a pain it can be to travel. There is always a mess at the airport. Their flights are delayed. A number of challenges happen. This year, just before Christmas, we had a major storm that hit us in the States, which created a number of delays in the air system. One of the air carriers that did not respond well to this or was significantly impacted by it was Southwest Airlines. And I'm going to use the Southwest Airlines story to share a little bit about customer experience, customer success, and responding to challenges. This one is near and dear to my heart because we had travel planned and we ended up having to rebook that travel with another airline. And given the amount of travel that I do or that I've done in the past, I'm pretty comfortable moving things around. So it wasn't a huge issue for us. We found out about it before we went to the airport. We were lucky. There are a number of people out there who aren't frequent travelers, who aren't as lucky, who were not keeping track of the system as things were going along. And ultimately, they were significantly impacted by this. Families and luggage and missing Christmas and maybe even missing New Year's and those kind of things. So I thought I'd share a little bit of an experience. One of the things that happened with us is once we started seeing the challenges on Twitter that were happening, we started tracking what was happening with flights out of Phoenix, specifically the flight that we were going to be on a couple of days in advance, and realized that although, and in this instance, we were going to do we had a connection, same airplane, but we we're going to stop in a specific city. And what I noticed is that the flights out of that city were not moving. And so although our flight had not been canceled, it looked like it would be canceled at some point in time. So we made some adjustments and ended up flying through another carrier. The lack of communication from a company around this has a significant impact on people's plans. There are a number of people out there who might have been able to drive to the location, but due to communication that was happening, highlighting system delays that were maybe at first an hour and then 2 hours and then extending beyond that before flights were canceled, they started to reduce options for others. So if you're in a business and you have a challenge that you're working through, communicate with your customers clearly. It may not be the thing that they want to hear, but it's going to help them make more effective decisions. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's say that there is a product release that you have due in a given period of time. That product release is scheduled to be delivered on maybe January 1st. Not a great time for product releases, but let's just say that it's to be delivered on January 1st. Then you find out as you get closer and closer that you're going to miss the mark. Well, instead of communicating it out to customers, you decide to withhold the information until the last minute and then say that you're sorry about a delay. Well, what happens if the customer on the other end has resources in place to support that launch on the 1st of January? And now they find out after the fact, even though you had ample time to communicate, they find out after the fact that those resources now are not going to be needed because you've not had the product release available for them to implement in the time period that you originally set the expectations around. I know that's a loose example, but it highlights the importance of transparency and communication with our customer base. The more we can keep them informed, the better position they will be in order to take corrective action, make choices based on what they know, rather than what rather than what they expect. So think about your customers when you need to communicate bad information, even though it may not be well received on the customer side. The sooner you can communicate it, the better. The sooner you can communicate it, the better. And the reason the sooner you can communicate, the better is that on the customer side, they can make some adjustments. Okay, so let's say that you nail the communication piece. Well, then the next piece afterward might be, how are we going to make it right? What is our plan? What expectations can we set with folks around the plan? In this specific instance with Southwest, they kept pushing out the dates for which you could go ahead and adjust travel. This is what drove us to use a different carrier to fly out of Phoenix. The lack of clarity around the timing there created a lack of flexibility for us as a customer, and that lack of clarity around what's next, the ambiguity, the uncertainty, can create a number of questions and concern within your customer base. So not only when you find out that you've got bad information, should you communicate it clearly so that you can set proper expectations, but when you know that people are going through the process of planning and they have resources that they need to bring together, make sure that you're communicating that well in advance so that they can plan appropriately. Then the third piece is, what do you do from a post-mortem perspective? Now, Southwest has run into this a couple of times. The last time I ran into it with them was back in October of 2021. And these things happen. It's air travel. Southwest's ecosystem is probably, or I would expect, is a logistical nightmare. You think about what they need to do. They've got these multiple variables that they need to move around, multiple aircraft. Now, granted, they're all 737s and there are different versions of them, but they've got multiple aircraft that need to be coordinated around multiple cities with multiple people. So they've got people, they have product or technology. Let's call it technology. They have people, they have technology, the planes, and they have locations that all need to be spread out, all operating within a specific piece of time. Well, when you've got human operators and you've got things that are outside of your control and you've got a number of other variables that start to play into this, you can see how a gap, a shift, a challenge in a specific part of the chain can have significant effects throughout the rest of the chain. Well, as part of a post-mortem review, imagine it's going to be very important for them to go through the process of saying, okay, what could we have done differently? How can we reduce some of the risk that we have relative to the motion of planes moving around and getting from one place to another? What systems can we have in place so that our crew, both flight attendants and pilots, can be really clear about where they are so that we know where they are, they know where they need to be, and there's some methods that we can get them into those places. This is where process that Chip Huth, Tanner Brock, Kevin Benson had introduced me to a couple of years ago at a red teaming event. And there are some red teaming processes that you can go through to not only do that after action review type stuff and figure out what could we have done differently so that we can avoid this kind of challenge in the future, but what are some of the things that we can put in place to understand or anticipate what the potential challenges are for us in the future before they happen. And these are things like pre-mortems. When Lori Rudiman was on the podcast a couple of years ago, we talked about pre-mortems. With another red teaming tool is something like the 4 ways of seeing. So understanding how different folks will see it. So one might be how a customer might see Southwest, how a Southwest might see a customer, how the customer might see themselves, and how Southwest might see themselves, as an example. So I think this is pretty cool that a scenario like this provides a learning opportunity for all of us in the context of both communication, in the context of planning, in the context of leadership and culture. I think there's been a lack of leadership in the way that the airline has communicated out to its customer base. And it's kind of interesting to see the DOT get involved in some kind of investigation around it. The biggest challenge that I've had with it, beyond some of the other stuff that have gone on relative to just personal inconvenience, and that's all this is a personal inconvenience, at least for me, and for other families, it's much more significant. The biggest challenge that I've had is the complete lack of leadership and transparency in attributing this, continuing to focus this on weather delays, when the reality is the weather has passed and the weather has impacted a number of other air carriers. But this is a system challenge inside, a logistics challenge inside, a logistics and technology challenge inside Southwest that ultimately comes back to leadership, decision making, accountability. And when you get into decision making and accountability from a leadership and organization perspective, that gets focused more on what's the culture inside your organization. How do we do what we do? How do we execute on the work that we do? How do we go about doing our business? How do we engage with others? So I've been a fan of Southwest for 20 some odd years. I've traveled with them a lot. I think they've got an opportunity to improve as a result of this. And I think we all have an opportunity to look at our businesses and identify ways that we can improve. If you were impacted by Southwest, and you've got a story to share about how they could have done better, let me know. I'm interested in this, especially in the feedback related to the episode. If you have run into other challenges inside your business related to the planning aspect or the reacting to challenges, let me know about that too. Those are the kinds of things that I work with businesses to help them think a bit differently about how they approach the people and process side of things. I hope you have an awesome holiday week. I hope you have an amazing new year. Thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale podcast. If you know of someone who would gain value out of this discussion, please share it with them. If you have a topic you'd like me to get into on one of these solo episodes, please let me know that as well. If you have a question you'd like me to answer on one of these solo episodes, please let me know that as well. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process? Thank you.